Good morning, dear students. Our topic for today's discussion is middle ear. We all know that ear is the organ of hearing and it also has a role in maintaining equilibrium of the body. Ear is divided into external ear, middle ear and internal ear. We'll concentrate on the middle ear. The middle ear or the tympanic cavity is located within the petrous part of temporal bone. You might be familiar with this part by now. This is the petrous part and it is filled with air and it is lined by mucous membrane. The communications of the middle ear are anteriorly it communicates with the nasopharynx through the auditory tube and posteriorly it communicates with the mastoid antrum through adductus to mastoid antrum. So in this diagram, you can see the section of petromastoid bone. That means petrous part and mastoid part of the temporal bone. And here you can see the mastoid antrum, the tympanic cavity or the middle ear, and the auditory tube, which is also known as the pharyngotympanic tube. Now, you can see that it appears like a pistol, right? And the body of the pistol is represented by the tympanic cavity, whereas the handle by the mastoid antrum and the nozzle by the auditory tube. The middle ear is shaped like a cube that is compressed from side to side. And the measurements are, you can see here the anteroposterior diameter is 15 millimeter. The vertical diameter is also 15 millimeter. Then the transverse diameters at the roof it is 6 millimeter. In the center it is 2 millimeter and at the floor it is 4 millimeter. So what are the contents of middle ear? I said initially that it is lined by mucous membrane and it is filled with air. So inside the mucous lining you have got air and outside the mucous lining you have the three ear ossicles, that is the malleus, ingus and stapes. Two muscles, that is tensor tympani and stapedius. Two nerves, that is cauda tympani and tympanic plexus. Then vessels supplying and draining the middle ear and ligaments of the ear ossicles. The subdivisions of the middle ear are three parts, that is epitympanum, mesotympanum and hypotympanum. So this is in relation with the tympanic membrane. The part that is above the tympanic membrane is epitympanum. The part that is opposite to the tympanic membrane is mesotympanum, and that part that is below the tympanic membrane is hypotympanum. The epitympanum or attic, it contains the head of malleus, the body and short process of ingus. These are ear ossicles. Whereas the mesotympanum, that is a part opposite to the tympanic membrane, consists of the handle of malleus, long process of ingus and stapes. And this is the narrowest part of the middle ear. Whereas the hypotympanum is a part below the tympanic membrane. So what is the shape of the middle ear? I said initially it is shape of a cube which is compressed on either side. So it is roughly cuboidal. So definitely it will be having a roof, a floor, anterior wall, posterior wall, medial wall and lateral wall. The roof is also known as tegmental wall. Why? Because it is formed by the tegmen tympani. So tegmen tympani is a thin plate of bone over the petrous part of temporal bone. And this tegmen tympani, it separates the tympanic cavity or the middle ear from the middle cranial fossa. And this tegmen tympani also forms a roof over the adductus ad antrum. And you can see here, this is pierced by two nerves, that is lesser and greater petrosal nerves. So let's see two of the applied aspects related to this region. So did you identify the petrous part of temporal bone and the tegmen tympani that is forming the roof here? Now you can see here, in case of young people, the tegmen tympani remains unossified. In that case, what will happen? The infection from the tympanic cavity can spread through the unossified tegmen tympani to the meninges covering the brain. And the second figure, you can identify the superior petrosal sinus over the superior border of the petrous part of temporal bone that we have already learned. Now, the veins of tympanic cavity drain into the superior petrosal sinus. So what will happen if there is any infection in the tympanic cavity? The infection through these veins will spread to the intracranial sinuses. One more applied aspect you have to remember in this region, that is in transverse fracture of the skull base, the tegmen tympani is usually involved, and that can lead to dislocation of the middle ear ossicles and also rupture of the tympanic membrane. And this can also lead to injury to the dura mater over the roof that can cause escape of CSF into the middle ear. And this will lead to CSF otorrhea, that is discharge of CSF through ear, that is known as CSF otorrhea. So next is floor. Floor is also formed by a thin plate of bone which separates the tympanic cavity from the jugular bulb. Now the floor is also known as jugular wall because it is formed by a thin plate of bone, that is which is containing the jugular fossa on the petrous part of temporal bone. Okay, so this jugular fossa contains the superior bulb of the internal jugular vein. Since that is present, this floor is also known as the jugular wall. This floor can be deficient or sometimes it can be thickened. If it is deficient, what will happen? The tympanic cavity will be then just separated from the vein only by a mucous membrane and fibrous tissue. And sometimes the floor is thickened and invaded by accessory mastoid air cells. Now, just like in the roof, we can see here the floor is also pierced by a nerve that is known as the tympanic branch of glossopharyngeal nerve. So this nerve passes in between the jugular fossa and the lower opening of the carotid canal, and it enters the tympanic cavity to take part in the formation of tympanic plexus that we'll see later. Next, we'll see the anterior wall. The anterior wall is also known as the carotid wall because it comes in relation with the internal carotid artery. Now, let's see the anterior wall into two parts, that is upper part and lower part. Now, first look at the lower part. The lower part consists of the posterior wall of bony carotid canal, which contains the internal carotid artery and surrounded by plexus of sympathetic nerves. And this wall is also pierced by two nerves, that is superior and inferior carotico-tympanic vessels and nerves. So we have seen the lower part of the anterior wall. Now we'll see the upper part of the anterior wall. The upper part is having two canals, upper canal and lower canal. So the upper canal is for tensor tympani muscle, and the lower canal is for bony part of the auditory tube. Now both these canals pass forwards, downwards and medially, and they get opened at the junction of petrous and squamous part of temporal bone. Now let's see the posterior wall. The posterior wall is also known as mastoid wall because it is in close relation with the mastoid antrum. So the posterior wall separates the tympanic cavity from the mastoid antrum. You can divide the posterior wall into two parts, that is upper part and lower part. The upper part contains adytus to mastoid antrum. So this is an opening that is connecting the tympanic cavity with the mastoid antrum, that is the adytus to mastoid antrum. And just below that, or just at the lower part of the adytus, you can see a small depression that is known as fossa incudis. And this is connected to the short process of the incus, that is the ear ossicle, by a ligament. Now in the lower part, you can see a vertical bony canal. That vertical bony canal lodges the facial nerve. And this facial nerve through this region descends up to the stylomastoid foramen. And just above the vertical bony canal, you can see a hollow pyramidal eminence that is projecting forward, and you can see it contains a muscle known as stapedius muscle. So at the apex of this pyramidal eminence, the stapedius muscle, the tendon of that projects forwards to the neck of the stapes, which is another ear ossicle. And then you can also see one small canalicus that is known as posterior canalicus. This is located at the junction of the posterior wall and lateral wall, and through this canalicus the chorda tympanic nerve emerges. Now let's see the medial wall. The medial wall is also known as the labyrinthine wall because it projects or it faces towards the bony labyrinth of the internal ear. The medial wall forms the lateral boundary of the internal ear. Some of the important features are promontory, fenestra vestibuli, which is also known as oval window or fenestra ovalis, then fenestra cochleae, which is also known as round window or fenestra rotunda, processus trochleariformis or cochleariformis, then facial canal, which is also known as fallopian canal or the oblique part of facial canal. Now other features are sinus tympani, subiculum and ponticulus. Now we'll see each feature one by one. Now we'll see the features of the medial wall. The first feature is the promontory. So promontory is a rounded prominence that is present in the center and that is produced by the basal turn of cochlea. Now you can see the tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal nerve ramifies on this and forms the tympanic plexus. Next feature you can see is the fenestra vestibuli, which is also known as the oval window. And this is a kidney shaped structure, or you can say a reniform aperture, and that is located above and behind the promontory. This is closed by the base of stapes, which is an earocicle, and annular ligament. The next feature is fenestra cochleae or round window, and that is seen below and behind the promontory. And this is closed by fibrous secondary tympanic membrane. Now another feature you can see is sinus tympani. So sinus tympani is a depression behind the promontory between the fenestra vestibuli and the fenestra cochleae. You have seen the vertical part of the facial nerve canal in the posterior wall. So here you get the oblique part of facial nerve canal, which is found to be seen above the fenestra vestibuli, and it joins the bony canal, which is the vertical part of bony canal, along the posterior wall of the tympanum. Now another feature is processus cochleariformis, which is a hook leg process, and it is derived from the backward extension of the bony partition that is seen between the two canals. There is a canals for tensor tympani and canal for auditory tube. At the beginning of the facial nerve canal, as the facial nerve enters into the medial wall, it shows an acute bend that turns the direction of the course of nerve from lateral to posterior. Now this bend is called as external genu of facial nerve, and it is occupied with the geniculate ganglion. And the peculiarity is that the greater petrosal nerve arises here. So this is the facial nerve that is entering the internal auditory meatus, and you can see the external genu where there is bend of the facial nerve, and here the geniculate ganglion is located, and from here greater petrosal nerve arises. Now this is the oblique part of the facial nerve canal, and this is the vertical part of the facial nerve canal, and you can also see the nerve to stapedius and also the chorda tympani nerve. Now there are some other features that you have to know in the medial wall. They are subiculum, which is the posterior extension of the promontory, which separates the oval and round window. And there is a thin plate of bone which connects the promontory to the pyramid of the posterior wall, and that is known as ponticulus. And we have already mentioned about the sinus tympani. The sinus tympani is a depression behind the promontory, and it is occupied by ambula of the posterior semicircular canal. Here you can see the basal turn of cochlea, and that is causing the rounded prominence, which is known as the promontory. So next is the lateral wall. So lateral wall, most of it is formed by the tympanic membrane. So the tympanic membrane or the eardrum is an oval, semi-transparent, pearly gray trilaminar membrane, and it separates the middle ear cavity from the external acoustic meatus. It is about 0.1 millimeter in thickness, and its length is about 9 to 10 millimeter and breadth is about 8 to 9 millimeter. It is placed at an angle of 55 degree with the floor of the external auditory meatus. In newborn, the membrane is horizontal, so because of that, a child can withstand noisy sound better than adult. The circumference of the membrane is made up of a fibrocartilaginous ring that is known as annulus tympanus, and it is attached to the sulcus of the tympanic plate, which is at the bottom of the external auditory meatus. Now the sulcus is deficient above, and from the two ends of this arise two malleolar folds that is known as the anterior and posterior malleolar folds, and these two folds converge to the lateral process of the malleus in the upper part of tympanic membrane. The subdivisions of the tympanic membrane are pars flaccida and pars tensa. So you have seen the anterior and posterior malleolar folds. These folds divide the tympanic membrane into these two subdivisions. Pars flaccida is the upper region, that is a small triangular lax region, and it is also known as Shrapnel's membrane. And the pars tensa is the rest of the region, and it is rendered taut by the attachment of the handle of malleus and disposition of radiating fibers of the intermediate layer from the handle. So these are the two subdivisions of the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane has got two surfaces, lateral surface and medial surface. Lateral surface is directed downwards, forwards and laterally, whereas medial surface is convex towards the tympanic cavity. And umbo is referred to the point of maximum convexity where the handle of malleus is attached. The handle of malleus is crossed medially by the chorda tympani nerve, which runs forward between the fibrous and mucous layers of the membrane at the junction of pars flaccida and pars tensa. So we have seen the subdivisions and surfaces of the tympanic membrane. Now we'll see the structure of the tympanic membrane. So I said initially it is a trilaminar membrane. That means it has got three layers. So these layers are outer cuticular layer, intermediate fibrous layer and inner mucous layer. This outer cuticular layer is hairless and it is lined by stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. And this layer is devoid of dermal papillae. The intermediate fibrous layer consists of outer radiating and inner circular fibers, and these radiating fibers diverge from the handle of malleus to the periphery, whereas the circular fibers are abundant at the periphery and scanty in the center. In the region of the pars flaccida, this fibrous layer is replaced by loose connective tissue. The third layer is the inner mucous layer, and it is lined by simple columnar or simple squamous epithelium with patches of ciliated cells in the upper part of the membrane. You also need to know three recesses related to the mucous membrane. Here the recesses are anterior, posterior and Prusac recess. The anterior recess is between the handle of malleus and an anterior fold containing the chorda tympani nerve, whereas the posterior recess is between the handle of malleus and a posterior fold containing the chorda tympani nerve. And Prusac recess or Prusac pouch is a mucous recess above the lateral process of malleus and intervening between the neck of malleus and pars flaccida of the tympanic membrane. So, when you examine the tympanic membrane with the help of otoscope, you have to check for the color, the curvature, presence of any lesions, position of the malleus, and also you have to see a cone of light that is reflected in the anterior-inferior quadrant of the membrane from the umbo. So that is very important in the clinical examination of tympanic membrane. When you look through otoscope, the normal appearance of tympanic membrane is that you can see the handle of malleus. You can see the long process of incus about parallel to the handle of malleus, and the cone of light can be seen in the anteroinferior quadrant. So the cone of light is suggestive of the normal alignment, consistency and shape of the tympanic membrane. In conditions like acute otitis media, where you have the rise in intratympanic pressure, the tympanic membrane bulges out, losing its outer convexity, and therefore the cone of light will be altered. Now we'll see the blood supply of the tympanic membrane. The arteries supplying the tympanic membrane are over the lateral surface, or that is the outer surface, you have the deep auricular branch of maxillary artery, and this artery ramifies beneath the cuticular layer. Whereas over the inner surface or the medial surface, you have the stylomastoid branch of posterior auricular artery and anterior tympanic branch of maxillary artery. And both these arteries supply the mucous layer. The venous drainage includes over the lateral surface, the veins drain into the external jugular vein, whereas over the medial surface, the veins drain into transverse sinus and pterygoid venous plexus. Now the nerve supply, over the lateral surface, you have in the upper and anterior part, auricular temporal nerve. In the lower and posterior part, you have auricular branch of vagus nerve. And on the medial surface, you have the tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal nerve through tympanic plexus. Or in other words, you can say the cuticular layer is supplied by the auricular temporal nerve and the auricular branch of vagus nerve, and the mucous layer is supplied by the glossopharyngeal nerve through the tympanic plexus. Now we'll see the development of tympanic membrane. The development of tympanic membrane is very important and it is very peculiar because it develops from all the three germ layers. It is the only structure in the body that develops from all the three germ layers. So each layer of the tympanic membrane is developed from each germ layer. So the first layer, that is the cuticular layer, develops from the ectoderm of the dorsal end of first branchial cleft. The intermediate fibrous layer develops from the mesoderm of the adjoining branchial arches, and the inner mucous layer develops from the endoderm of the tuber tympanic recess, and this recess is formed by the fusion of the dorsal ends of the first and second pharyngeal pouches. This figure is showing the boundaries of the middle ear. We have seen it as a box, a cuboidal box, and now the lateral side is opened up. So you can visualize the lateral wall also in this picture. So now let's revise this diagram. So this is the right tympanic cavity, that is the section through petromastoid bone, and you can see the medial view. So here is the posterior wall that is comprising of the mastoid antrum, mastoid air cells, then adductus to antrum. Then you have the roof that is formed by the tegmen tympani, and it is pierced by the lesser petrosal nerve and greater petrosal nerve. Then here you have the floor, and beneath that you can see the superior bulb of the internal jugular vein. Here this is the styloid process, and this is the stylomastoid foramen. And on the anterior wall, you can see the tensor tympani muscle and the canal for that muscle. Then the canal for the auditory tube, and between that you can see the processus cochleariformis. And in the lower part of the canal, you can see the canal for internal carotid artery, and around that you have the sympathetic plexus of nerves. And in the medial wall, you can see the promontory, and over that you can see the tympanic branch of glossopharyngeal nerve that is forming the tympanic plexus. Then you have the oval window, then the round window over here. Here you are having the pyramidal eminence and the stapedius. And you can also see the oblique part of the facial canal here and the vertical part of the facial canal, and that is coming out through the stylomastoid foramen. So this is the lateral wall of the right tympanic cavity. You can clearly see the tympanic membrane, the anterior and posterior malleolar folds, separating this into the pars flaccida and pars tensa. Now you can also see the malleus and the incus, and you can see the chorda tympani nerve that is passing in front of the handle of malleus. The infection of middle ear is known as otitis media. It is more common in infants and children because they are more prone for upper respiratory tract infection, and from there the infection can spread through the pharyngotympanic tube. Now, long-standing infection can lead to a condition known as chronic suppurative otitis media or CSOM. And here in this case the patient presents with ear discharge and perforation of the tympanic membrane. The spread of infection from the middle ear can give rise to many clinical conditions. So if it is affecting the posterior wall or the mastoid wall, you will get acute mastoiditis or mastoid abscess because of the involvement of the mastoid antrum and the mastoid air cells through adductus ad antrum in the posterior wall. And lower motor neuron type of facial palsy occurs when infection erodes the papery thin bony wall of the facial canal. The middle ear infection can spread upward through the roof, that is through the tegmen tympani, and that can lead to meningitis and temporal lobe abscess. Now, if the infection spreads to the floor or the jugular wall, it can cause transverse sinus and sigmoid sinus thrombosis because these sinuses are in close relation with the floor. Now, the medial wall is also known as labyrinthine wall, you know that. So, the infection, if it spreads to the medial wall, that can lead to labyrinthitis, and that is presented with vomiting and vertigo. So next is myringotomy. So it is the procedure by which a surgical incision is made on the posterior and inferior quadrant of the tympanic membrane, and this is done to avoid injury to the chorda tympanic nerve and ear ossicles. The myringoplasty or tympanoplasty is a procedure by which the perforations in the pars tensa are repaired. So for repair, we use graft from the temporal fascia and the perichondrium of the tragus. Both these tissues are immunologically inert tissues, so they are used for taking as graft. Here in the first figure, you can see the perforation of the tympanic membrane, and the last figure you can see the graft has been placed over the perforation. So what are the contents of tympanic cavity? So tympanic cavity contains three ossicles, that is the malleus, ingus and stapes. Then two muscles, that is the tensor tympani and stapedius, 6 sets of arteries and 4 sets of nerves. So this is the malleus, that is the hammer shaped structure. You can see it has got an articular surface for the incus. It has got a head. So on the head, on the posterior aspect of the head, you have the articular surface for incus. Then just below the head, you have the neck. It has got a lateral process, anterior process, and also a handle. So this is the incus. The incus has got a body which has got an articular surface for articulation with the malleus. Then it also has got short process, long process and a lenticular process, and on the tip of the lenticular process you have got a nodule that is known as lentiform nodule. This resembles the shape of a premolar tooth. So the next ear ossicle is the stapes. It has got head, neck and two diverging limbs that is known as the anterior and posterior crus. These limbs are connected by a base which is a reniform base, that is a kidney shaped structure, and over the head you have got a cup shaped depression onto which the lentiform nodule of the ingus articulates. Now this stapes is the shape of that of a stirrup, and the thing you have to remember is that all the auditory ossicles assume adult size at birth. So the three ear ossicles, the first one malleus resembles a hammer, whereas incus resembles an anvil or premolar tooth, whereas stapes resembles a stirrup. And the malleus develops from the first pharyngeal arch cartilage. Incus also develops from first pharyngeal arch cartilage, whereas stapes develops from the second pharyngeal arch cartilage. Now the muscle attached to malleus is tensor tympani, whereas muscle attached to stapes is stapedius. The joints formed are the malleus and ingus together form inguinal-malleolar joint, which is a saddle type of synovial joint. Ingus forms the inguinal-malleolar and inguinostapedial joints with the malleus and stapes respectively, and the stapes forms the inguinostapedial joint with the incus, which is a ball and socket type of joint. So this is the ossicular chain. You can see the tympanic membrane, and you can see the handle of malleus, then malleus articulus with the incus, incus with the stapes, and the base of the stapes is closing the oval window along with the annular ligament. Now, some of the applied aspects related to auditory ossicles are one is otosclerosis. It's a condition in which there is abnormal ossification of the annular ligament, which anchors the footplate or the base of stapes to the oval window. And because of this, the stapes won't be able to move, and that can lead to deafness. So, this is one of the most common cause of conductive deafness in adults. Another condition is stapedectomy. It's a surgical procedure. That's a surgical removal of stapes as a whole. Next is stepedotomy, where the footplate of stapes is retained and it is drilled to expose the vestibule. Now, in both of these cases, a small piston made up of Teflon or titanium is used to replace the stapes, and it is fixed with the incus with the help of a steel wire. As I have said initially, you have got two muscles, that is tensor tympani and stapedius muscles. So the tensor tympani muscle takes its origin from the cartilaginous part of the auditory tube and sulcus tubae, and you can see here it is inserted into the root of handle of malleus. Its nerve supplies by the trunk of mandibular nerve through aortic ganglion, where there is no relay, and they convey the fibers from the nerve to medial pterygoid muscle. Action is it tightens the tympanic membrane. The stapedius muscle, it arises from the pyramidal eminence that you have learned before, and it gets inserted into the posterior surface of the neck of stapes. It is supplied by facial nerve, and its action is that it draws stapes laterally. Both the muscles contract reflexly and simultaneously, and they dampen the loud sounds to protect the internal ear from noise trauma. And paralysis of the stapedius muscle leads to a condition known as hyperacusis. In this condition, even if the person whispers, that the affected person can hear it as a loud noise. So 6 arteries are supplying the blood to the middle ear. These arteries are anterior tympanic branch of maxillary artery, stylomastoid branch of posterior auricular artery, petrosal branch of middle meningeal artery, superior tympanic branch of middle meningeal artery, branch from artery to pterygoid canal, and tympanic branch of internal carotid artery. And out of these branches, the anterior tympanic branch and the stylomastoid branch provide the major blood supply. The veins from the middle ear drain into pterygoid venous plexus and superior petrosal sinus, whereas the lymphatics drain into the retropharyngeal lymph nodes, parotid lymph nodes, and upper deep cervical lymph nodes. 4 sets of nerves are important here. These are superior and inferior carotico-tympanic nerves, tympanic branch of glossopharyngeal nerve, mandibular nerve, and facial nerve. So the superior and inferior carotico-tympanic nerves we have already seen when we learned about the anterior wall, and these nerves are vasomotor because they wind around the internal carotid artery. The tympanic branch of glossopharyngeal nerve, that we have already seen that it enters the middle ear through a canaliculus in the floor of the tympanic cavity, and it also takes part in the formation of the tympanic plexus. We have seen the facial nerve passing through the oblique canal as well as the vertical bony canal. Its branches are chordae tympani nerve, greater petrosal nerve, and nerve to stapedius. The chordae tympani nerve carries taste sensation from anterior two-thirds of the tongue, and also it provides secretomotor fibers to the submandibular and sublingual salivary glands. The greater petrosal nerve provides secretomotor fibers to the lacrimal, nasal and palatal mucosal glands. And nerve to stapedius supplies stapedius muscle. We have heard about the tympanic plexus when we learned about the medial wall. So the tympanic plexus is a plexus of nerves on the promontory in the medial wall of the middle ear, and it is formed by tympanic branch of glossopharyngeal nerve, which is also known as Jacobson's nerve, superior and inferior carotico-tympanic nerves, and branch from genicular ganglion of the facial nerve. And this plexus supplies the mucous membrane of the middle ear, the mastoid air cells, and the eustachian tube. Now, from this tympanic plexus, the lesser petrosal nerve arises, and this carries secretomotor fibers of the parotid of the glossopharyngeal nerve, and that supplies the parotid gland via the otic ganglion. The mucous membrane of the tympanic cavity is ciliated columnar, whereas it can be non-ciliated and flat over the auditory ossicles, posterior wall, posterior part of medial wall, parts of tympanic membrane, mastoid antrum and mastoid air cells. Mastoid abscess is a common clinical condition. In this case, the mastoid antrum is reached surgically through the lateral wall. So before reaching that, you have to know the boundaries of the suprameatal triangle or the Mc-Evans triangle. So this triangle is bounded superiorly by the supramastoid crest, anteriorly by the posterior border of the bony external auditory meatus, and posteriorly by a line tangential to the posterior border of the external auditory meatus. So just deep to this triangle is where the mastoid antrum lies. The pharyngotympanic tube block is seen in children where there is inflammation of the mucosa, and here in children the diameter of the tube is very small, and because of this there is the persistent block can lead to creation of vacuum inside the middle ear, because here the air trapped there is already absorbed, and also there can be accumulation of the secretion inside, and this condition is known as the glue ear. And this can be abolished by creating an opening in the tympanic membrane and by inserting a flanged tube called tympanostomy tube or grommet tube. If Bell's palsy involves the facial nerve above the level of nerve to stapedius, if it is the level of the Bell's palsy, you can say the nerve to stapedius and cauda tympani both are affected. So the patient will be having hyperacusis due to loss of nerve to stapedius, and also the patient, due to the involvement of cauda tympanic nerve, he will be having impairment of taste sensation from anterior two-thirds of the tongue, and also loss of secretion of submandibular and sublingual salivary glands. Now, if the palsy affects below the level of stapedius, it is below the pyramid, the nerve to stapedius is spared. So the patient won't be having hyperacusis, but he'll be only having the symptoms related to the loss of cauda tympanic nerve. And if Bell's palsy affects nearer to the stylomastoid foramen, then the cauda tympanic nerve will also be spared. So cholesteatoma is a disease condition in which the normal mucosa of the tympanic cavity, that is the ciliated columnar epithelium, is replaced by stratified squamous keratinized epithelium, and it erodes the walls and ossicles and destroys it. The clinical test for hearing acuity includes two tests, that is basically Rinne's test and Weber's test. So deafness can be due to diseases of the middle ear, that is causing the conductive deafness. And if there is any lesion in the cochlear nerve or as well as the cochlea, you will get nerve deafness or sensorineural deafness. So to differentiate that, we do Rinne's test or Weber's test. So we have discussed in detail about the boundaries, contents and various applied aspects of the middle ear. We also discussed in detail about the tympanic membrane and its applied importance also. So I hope this topic is clear for you. Thank you.